In today's episode, we talk to Mr. Shantanu Pusalakar and his journey in this industry of sports journalism. We also talk about how it has evolved and the challenges that he has faced, and also how he has gone into new and upcoming things, his experiences as a mentor and as a teacher, and what are some of his most memorable experiences in the industry, along with some advice for our up-and-coming youth in this industry. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Buzz Behind Sports. And today, we are going to dive into the topic of sports journalism. And with us, we have an industry expert, Mr. Shantanu Pusalakar. Welcome to the show, Mr. Pusalkar. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Harish.
So, talking about the sports journalism industry, what has led you into this industry?
So, Harish, very frankly, when I finished my graduation, I didn't really have a very inclination to get into sports journalism per se. I wanted to get into journalism or mass communication, and things were very different. When I started off, we didn't really have a sports journalism college or even sports management really, which you can do today. So largely students who came out of doing their graduation or wanted to get into mass communication, they would either give entrance tests to some of the best journalism colleges, not as many as they are there today, but the few that were there, and that's how you kind of opted to do journalism as a general field. There was no sports journalism one could, at least in India, one could kind of specialize in. So I think growing up, I had an interest in current affairs. I did like politics and sports a lot. And that's how I kind of, chartered my career into that space. So right after my graduation, I thought, while many of my friends were doing an MBA or people even doing a CA, I thought, let me take by default, or I don't know if it was by choice or it was something which just happened in my life, that I went into journalism, and no regrets. It's been 20 years that I've been doing what I do. Okay. And that's how I kind of got into journalism, because I had an interest there. And quite frankly, at that time, the whole industry, the media industry, was quite new in terms of private media, which was there. We always had Doordarshan and all for a long time, but you will not believe it, when I passed out of my journalism college, there were only 2 English news channels at the time. And there was sports media companies like ESPN, etc., but they were based out of Singapore. So India did not really have the kind of media that we have today. And I was just lucky, I'll say, that as soon as I graduated out of journalism, J school as we used to call it, is that the media space exploded. And in the space of 2-3 years, we had multiple channels, and it was really booming, which was kind of worked really well with what I did. And I think very lucky to be part of that media boom in the initial days.
So what kind of really pushed you to go into the sports area of the journalism industry?
Yeah. So it's an interesting story. So I did not start off in sports journalism or sports media, to be frank. Right out of college, I got placed in CNBC, which is a business channel. Yeah. And quite frankly, I'll be very candid, I was just very happy to get a job. Because that's the first thing all students really, when you get a placement, yeah. That time it was kind of unheard of getting placement from college in a mass communication school, because there were very few of them and not a lot of people came to campus. That time we only heard these amazing stories of how people got placed out of an IIM or, IITs, etc. Yeah. So when I got placed, I was one of the 12 people who was picked up by CNBC. We were lucky at that time, they were shifting their operations from Delhi to Mumbai, where they've been for the last 20 years now. They started off in Delhi, and they wanted young blood to kind of come and take over operations here in terms of doing their business shows, which were launched out of their office in Lower Parel. Yeah. And that's how I got into CNBC. So, got a job, was very happy, called up my parents, as all of us do, and told them I've got a job. And I was there for about 3 years in CNBC, and I had done everything there. I had produced all the shows. I wanted to do a bit of reporting, but it was not possible. They didn't really give people who are on produced shows, as we call in the desk, to do a lot of reporting, because they wanted specialized people, and rightly so. So I had this thought that I need to do something different. And that time, this was 2007, is when, it's a very funny story. Actually, I'll share it with you. I just happened to see a former classmate of mine who was with me in college where we were doing journalism together. He was working at Times Now, which is a news channel. And I saw his piece to camera about he was at, I think, Wankhede Stadium or something. And I kid you not, the first thought that came into mind is, he can do it, why can't I do it? So I got in touch with him, and luck would have it that this was just before the 2007 World Cup, where India crashed out badly, if you remember.
Yeah.
They lost both their games, and it was a very infamous World Cup because a lot of bad things happened. India lost, Pakistan's coach Bob Ulmer mysteriously died.
Yeah.
So, it was a World Cup which had a lot more controversy than actual, sporting action.
Yeah.
So, they were at that time on the lookout for a sports producer.
Yeah.
And I fitted the bill pretty well because I had done producing for 3 years at CNBC and done everything. So I knew exactly how the drill worked. And being a very passionate sports lover, which I still am, I just met the sports editor at the time and he took a quick interview. And because they were hiring, they said, why don't you join immediately? Why don't you join in a week? Or something, because the World Cup was still on, even though India had lost, but they had a lot of work to do. So it was just by chance that I saw my classmate and friend doing something like that. And I was like, I want to do it. And it just worked out. It worked out well. I think they say, right, if you really want something badly, sometimes you get it. So
that's how it comes to you.
It comes to you. So that's how I kind of got into the whole sports media journalism in 2007. And that time, see, if you, like, I would again repeat that time, journalism per se was divided into two things. One, you had your print journalists, which was newspapers and magazines, etc., which is still very robust at the time. Now you don't see it as much. There was no digital, obviously. And television, all the people who reported were at news channels. And you had ESPN Star, which was there, which didn't really do reporting per se, but they were broadcasters. So they did not have sports journalists per se, even though they had one or two reporters. But the maximum amount of reporting used to be done by TV or print reporters. And that era was very different, even though it's just about 17 years back, which is not very much in the past. It was a lot of reporting used to be done. In terms of real stories would come out. It was also the era where we had some legends who were still playing cricket. You had Ganguly and Sachin and Dravid and Lakshman in the Indian team. And cricket kind of took center stage. And at that time, I kid you not, you will not believe, most news channels, and Times Now at the time, Arnab was the editor-in-chief, he prioritized sports over general news. You will not believe it. Today, you see politics and every little thing taking center stage, and I won't comment what kind of spin or what they do. But that time, even if there was a selection for a series, which Indian selection, that would get 1 or 2 hours in the news cycle. Like, we would break news about what the team was. Or we would do little small things like if somebody got injured in practice, he would show that, and that would dominate news airways. At least Times Now did, because they thought that sports got viewership. And that was kind of his strategy at the time, because Times Now was not known as a general news channel much. They wanted to do this shock and awe technique. And at that time, sports worked well. So the first year was a lot of work, a lot of sleepless nights. So that was my initiation with sports journalism.
Okay, so going ahead with your career, it has been a very intriguing one.
Yes.
I was going through your LinkedIn, a lot of big names. There's Sportskeeda, Disney Star.
Yes.
So how did you transition from each one to eventually where you are now?
Yeah. So I think, like I told you my story, how I got into Times Now and what we did was, I think eventually while working at news somewhere, few things happened. One was that I was doing the same thing for a long time, even though I kind of did get more experienced and senior in my roles. And I was almost de facto heading the sports desk at Times Now. But the dream was always there to work for a sports channel, right? And that is something which all of us dream of. When we get into the industry, you want to be where the live action happens. You want to be part of the live production of a cricket match or anything for that. And again, as fate would have it, that Star was coming back to India in a big way. If you would remember it was a period when after ESPN Star was there in the initial years when cricket was being produced by them, there was a big break in which Neo Sports was kind of showing a lot of cricket games. This was in maybe the mid 2000s. And Star again decided around 2012 or so, where they again got the India rights and they were bidding. They already had the ICC rights, but they got the India rights and they had a lot of cash. So they wanted to expand. And just again, part of my career has been a lot of these funny or lucky anecdotes. So one day I'll share one how I got into Disney Star again. Is that person, actually he was not my colleague, but somebody whom I had worked with. He worked in a rival news channel. He sent me an SMS or WhatsApp, I don't remember, late at night one day saying that, you know what, Star is launching this new show which they are looking for people. Are you interested? And it came at like 10 o'clock at night or 10:30. I was about to turn in for the day. I'm like, sure, like why not? Like that was the dream, right? And to be very frank, at that time, you did not have like a robust LinkedIn or something. Largely, you got jobs by reaching out to people or somebody told you, okay, this opening is there or something. You did not have LinkedIn which showed you all the open positions, etc. It was largely by your network. And I was just lucky that he messaged me and he said, there's such and such person who's launching a new show. He's the head. Why don't you reach out to him? So I just sent him a cold message. And again, as fate would have it, they were really hiring aggressively. So I went and met this person at Star, their office in Lower Parel. And I guess they liked my profile and they wanted somebody immediately. Somehow that's the trend that's been in my life. And I said, when should I join? And he said a very famous thing which I still remember. He's like, you should have joined yesterday. So we wanted you to join yesterday. So they again, I wanted to leave wanted me to join in 1 week because they were launching a show. And I had the tough job of going and telling Arnab that I need to quit Times now. He didn't take it very kindly initially, but he let me go, to be credit to him. He let me go in a week. And I joined Star Sports, which was my dream probably for a good 10 years. And that happened. And remember, this was a Star Sports which had broken off from ESPN. So they had a whole new management and they were still figuring things out. And they wanted to launch this daily show called Star Power, which they kind of went out of the way to hire actually the best people from news channels at that time, because Star was expanding and everybody knew. I was not the only one who got this lucky message. A lot of people had. So they really kind of mopped up the entire talent which was there in news. And many people had started to plateau in news because this was 2013 where news channels had stopped doing a lot of sports. And the arc was more towards general news. And they wanted to do a lot of that. So sports was kind of getting, on news channels was getting on the back burner, if I can say, or there was not a lot of importance. And when that happens, then budgets get cut and, stuff like that happens. So it was a natural shift to go to Star Sports. And then, I've just, to be very frank, I've made decisions in my life depending on where the wind is blowing. I've been lucky to get opportunities in those spaces in terms of in the sports industry. And I've seen the whole change, like from 2004 to 2024. And then ESPN happened when digital was kind of coming up big, and that's how I joined ESPN in 2017. And then, as fate would have it, ESPN was kind of downsizing and they were not really doing stuff in the Indian market much post-pandemic. And that's how I went to Sportskeeda, where was my first kind of experience working at a startup where they wanted to grow really fast. So they had this whole thing of wanting to grow 2x, 3x every year. And they wanted to build out and compete with people like CricBuzz and ESPN, etc. So I went and I took out a business role also there. So it was not only content. So even doing a business role where you had to handle, bring in revenue for the company and to look at overall, like not only content, but also see as to what money you can bring for, say, the video business. That's what I did at Sportskeeda.
So that's like a really very intriguing
quite comprehensive. Lot of things I've done, worn a lot of hats, to be very honest. But it's been a good ride.
Yeah, certainly. So talking about the live broadcasting that you do, we say how this field is very dynamic.
Yes.
So what are the challenges that are posed in this field that we don't see as the viewers?
Yes. So I think the thing about what I learned very early on in my career about live broadcast is that, see, the time is everything, right? If you have to go live at a particular time, you have to be ready at that time. You can't, and largely I've worked in live. Yes, you can record shows and play them out later on and stuff like that, which I've also done. But the thrill of live is very different. It makes you slightly more alert. And that is also, that challenges you. Because if you're not ready, you're not ready. You can't have a blank chair on air, or you can't have a blank anchor. And considering I worked almost all my career behind the scenes and not so much on screen, I've been the person who has prepped the show, or prepped the anchor, or made sure all the content is ready, or even decided as I've got senior what the content strategy has to be. So you have to be somebody who is very current. You have to live in the moment. You have to know everything that is possibly to know about what's happened 1 hour back or half an hour back, you know. So the challenge in that is to build a team of people who are as dedicated and driven as you are, and also to not miss out on anything. Because gone are the days when we would do a bulletin. In the old days, we did something and it's okay. We could repeat something afterwards, because there was no Twitter and there was no digital, or there was something which you didn't have your phone that time, right?
Yeah.
Which gave you every update. It was all on what came on TV. But what has changed after that is that you have to be very, very clear and confident about what you're putting on air. I think the one thing that I always would tell, and I learned, is that if you're in content and you've been somebody who's been a producer and produced shows, you remain a producer till the end. So somebody who's with 1 year experience or 20-year experience, what you put on air in terms of anything, you may be making a short video, maybe doing a long podcast like we're doing right now, or doing a live show, or even doing a live broadcast on cricket, for example, or any other sport. Putting things on air are the biggest challenge. And it's not, you and I see a very smart anchor speaking to us, but there's a lot of work which goes on in that. The technical part is something which is a very important of this, but also what you say is, you know, you just can't put anything on air, right? And if you are going to make a mistake, in the old days, somebody would catch you, you would get some flack. Today, immediately in 5 seconds, there'll be a meme made out of you, right? So I think that is the biggest thing. Like, you have to be well rehearsed. You need to live sport. I think that's true about any content which you're putting on air. You can't just, and this is what I believe, there are a lot of people, and I'm not criticizing anyone, in terms of people who are anchors or content creators, who think of it as a job, right? I think it has to be a life. If you make content your life, you will be somebody who's really good at it. So you have to be 24/7, 365 days if you want to do that. There are no Saturday, Sundays, and there are no public holidays, because if you see, most games are on weekends, right? And there are many ones on public holidays as well. Like we know Boxing Day test matches, or even other sports which are played during Diwali sometimes. So for the first good decade of my career, I didn't have any of this. And my parents would always wonder that you have a job like a fireman or a police officer or a doctor, and you know, you're not getting paid as much. So why are you doing this job? So I think that word, which is passion, that stood out for me. So even that is something which is the challenge, to be passionate every day to come and do that.
Yeah, that's true. So we spoke about your education earlier on, and we talk about how education is important to be qualified. You, according to your LinkedIn, you are passed out of IIM Ahmedabad. So how much of a difference does that make when you are in this field to have a better education qualification?
So that's a very good question. I think there's a new buzzword these days which largely came in the pandemic called upskilling, right? Which all of us have seen or heard or seen. So I think education has changed in terms of thinking about what you look at education as, right? So maybe a few years ago, or even when I passed out of college, it was probably a bridge to get the good job, right? Or get a good placement, like I said, which was a good salary, right? So even when I got into journalism, I went largely due to my passion.
Yeah.
But somewhere there was a payoff that there should be a placement. Though very frankly, when I joined my journalism school back then, there was no guarantee of a placement. We just hoped that we would get one. And now it's changed a lot in terms of how good or how, and I'm not saying that people who did MBAs that time when I was doing my journalism it was different. They primarily did that because they wanted to get into that field. Me upskilling right now, later in my career, is kind of twofold. And I think I would say it is a change in mindset. So when I went and decided to do executive MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, the thought was twofold, I'll be frank. One was to clearly kind of see where do I stand in my mid-career among my peers, right? Because content strategy, creating content, I had done all of it. I wanted to move to a business role, right? And while I had done some of it, even though I was not an MBA, I think it was a good stepping stone to probably upskill myself, polish some of the things that I know, learn some new things, and also probably put it out there in the industry that, okay, I'm not only somebody who knows content, but I can handle a business as well. And that's what an MBA does or takes you there. But I think the single biggest change for me by passing out of IIM, which was just a few months back, was the mindset change, right? It makes you look at everything differently. And probably I can't quantify it in one podcast or in a simple one-line answer. But the thing is that makes you think differently on things which you were not thinking before. Like, I'm not looking at things purely in a silo. I'm looking at a more 180-degree view about everything. Yeah. So if I'm even running any business, or if I'm running an educational institution, or even this podcast, I'm looking at everything that is there. I don't have a micro view, I have a more macro view. Yeah. So that is what I would say that my education lately has done to me. So the initial part was largely to become a graduate, find my specialization, get that job. And then the other one was probably getting to look at life differently and look at my career differently. And some people do all of it in their 20s. Yeah. Some people, if you get a second chance, I think you should do that as well.
Yeah, that's true. So when we talk about digital video production, yes. It has evolved over time. Yes. As you have said, you have not just been behind the scenes, but as a viewer, how do you see it has evolved over time in the sense of how the production has been broadcast onto the screen?
Yes. So I think it comes in two folds. I think one is how you actually produce something. And second is what is the messaging that you're trying to do in this video, which you're putting out. Yeah. So I think both have changed a lot, right? Initially, whenever even we produced anything on digital per se, we had complex cameras, you needed a big crew, etc. and all these things. But that changed very dramatically once your mobile phones and equipment, which was very light, you got things like gimbals, etc. You had, cordless mics, etc. That came in with as good a quality as a camera. And that changed and it democratized content creation, right? Anybody with a decent mobile phone and a decent idea about how to make good content, how to shoot good video, changed everything in terms of, like, I even know now, DOPs, as we call them, or senior camera guys who shoot on phones, or they know a lot about phones because they had to change. Yeah. They probably 10 years back or 15 years back had bulky cameras, right? So producing that content changed a lot in terms of how you looked at doing it. Initially, you needed a lot of time for setup. You needed to really plan your shoots. I think you should still plan your shoots, even if it's lighter equipment. But the thought process changed a lot in terms of how you want to produce something. And the messaging, which is actually the content, also changed with that. Because what happens is the moment you democratize content, you are looking at things in terms of what is going to appeal to different audiences. In the old days, you just made one piece of video and you expected everybody to watch it. Yeah. Now you're creating multiple formats, right? Like, we're doing a podcast, that is one format. You may be creating short video, that is another format. But I think production has changed and the messaging has changed depending on how things are getting easier, and not necessarily, but this is a personal opinion, not necessarily is that content becoming easier to make, because if everybody knew how to make great content, we would all win an Oscar.
Yeah.
So that's not how it is, but you still need to put the effort. But it's become much easier, if I have to simplify and say that or summarize. It's easier, but the thought behind it as to who you're serving in terms of that still is complex, but I think one can master it if you put your mind behind it.
Yeah, everything we can say, everything can be mastered if
Yes.
you put
Yes,
your heart and
absolutely.
soul to it. But talking about content strategy, that is
Yes.
something you have done a lot.
Yes.
So how do you approach it specifically for the sporting domain?
Yes. So I think content strategy in sports, primarily, if I had to divide it, it would be on live and non-live kind of production. So live is anything in terms of a live sport, or even a live show that you're doing, which is not catering to a particular sport. Like you can do a live bulletin, which actually doesn't happen anymore. Most of the live these days is a pre-post of this around the game, right? Or any event, sporting event. You don't have live shows which are agnostic to any sporting event now. That's kind of gone with the advent of digital, because you can just record something and put it, and it's available all the time. There's no appointment viewing as we have these days, right? So a live and non-live kind of decides your content strategy a lot. Content around a live sport will primarily feed off the live game, right? It will also feed off some of the surround sound which is there around the live game. It could be news. It could be certain things which have happened during the game, etc. Like you have a mid-inning show which talks about what's happened in the match, etc. But it is primarily what is happening in the live sport. So you can't really deviate much from that. I think non-live is something which personally excites me a lot, because it helps you think a lot in terms of creating content which you may, and it challenges you a lot. Because if you're expecting people to watch live content strategy around live sport, you have a ready-made product, right? So whatever happens there, you just need to speak about it. But when you don't have any live sport and you have to speak when there's a dry period, say between two games, or even if you're doing a podcast or you're doing a documentary on something, it really helps you kind of work on your creative juices, because that's when you really think, okay, if I'm doing this, what part of my audience is going to watch and why are they going to watch it, right? And then there are so many formats in that. Like the shortest format is a reel. Probably the longest format is a podcast these days, where some podcasts are 3-4 hours long. And I really wonder, do really people listen to such long podcasts? But they do. So there is an audience for a 30-second reel. There is an audience for a 3-hour podcast. But I think the no-brainer in that is that how good is your content? And that is something kind of gets decided as to you being able to understand your consumer. I don't think anybody can claim, at least I would never claim that I understand my consumer when I'm making content completely. But I really do put in the effort to make good content, which will be appreciated by everyone. So that now you may ask me a question, what is good content, right? So obviously some basics would be the way it's shot, the way it's produced, the scripting, etc. But something which, if I had to give an easy answer to that, is what is good content, is something where nobody can point a finger and say, okay, I got bored watching this. So there has to be something which is exciting you all the time, or at least has great storytelling. I think great storytelling has no equal. If you're a good storyteller about whatever topic you take, it could be sports content, it could be general entertainment, it could be even a reel. I think even if you make a 30-second reel with good storytelling and not just clickbait, where I put a caption like wait till the end and then there's nothing. Anybody who has talent in good storytelling can be good at content strategy.
That's true. You need to be attention grabbing. But on the topic of attention grabbing, just a personal question, what do you think of clickbaits? There are a lot of content houses that do that to try and get viewers and numbers up. What is your opinion on that?
It's a very difficult thing to put out. We have to give you a straight answer. A few years back, if you had asked me, I would have said that clickbait is cringe, right? But I think the rules have changed a lot, right? So it depends on what kind of business I am in. What is my objective? I think the objective is very important because I think primarily we are living in a world where attention spans are even lesser than a fly, right? So if I have to take care of that, what do I do is the question. And maybe at some places I do need clickbait, right? Because the objective is that people click on my video, right? But primarily, I think you shouldn't get into that sphere where only clickbait helps you, people consuming your content, right? Because then they will get an idea, okay, this person only does clickbait and there's no matter inside eventually. So I think you need both, right? So you do need an attractive thumbnail along with, so I look at clickbait as the garnish. It's not the main dish. The main dish is more important. But if there's no garnish, there's no point, right? So I am going to need the garnish as well.
That's very true. So we talk about live streaming and shoppable videos. That's something you're doing currently with Firework Media Group. So how does that work into the sports industry? How does that affect?
So it is not really very connected to the sports industry, though live streaming is something where sports also happens on. And to be very frank, some sports companies or sports streamers have wanted to integrate shopping with sports, and they've also seen if it works as a fan engagement tool. But I'll put a question to you. If you are watching, say, a tennis game, and you're watching Djokovic and Federer. Federer is retired now, but say, and Federer is Uniqlo and Djokovic is, say, Lacoste. And while I'm watching the game, I'm also giving an option to you that you can buy the same shoes or the same jersey. Would you, as a young person, be tempted to shop live while you're watching that game? Because it's a very easy fit. Because growing up, when I was to watch tennis games, I used to be attracted to their what jerseys they wore, or even a football game, for example, right? If you played yourself, then you're more attracted to it. Even if you don't play, you're still attracted because you want to look and wear the same clothes which your heroes have. So would you integrate shopping with that? Now, that is not an easy answer. I don't know what your answer is.
I would integrate. Aside from the fact that my wallet wouldn't allow me.
That's a different thing. That's a different thing, right? Maybe if I give you, because the idea in live streaming, which we did even with brands like, say, Samsung, etc., which was not related to sport, but they give hefty discounts on live streams, which you will not get anywhere else because they're getting that kind of volume. So imagine if you have 1,000 people on your stream, and you can get that kind of, in 1 hour, you can sell a particular TV which you're just launching. 1,000 is very modest. If I can get 1 million people tomorrow, which is very ambitious, very frankly. But even if I can get 1,000, 10,000 people, and even if the conversion is 10%, I am doing that in an hour, which probably 1,000 people walk into a TV store will not buy. Right? So similarly at a sports game, if I'm showing the same shoes which Djokovic is wearing, or say Haaland is wearing, and you're a big Man City fan, and you're a Haaland fan, and you think, okay, he's wearing these new shoes and I can just kind of integrate it along with the live stream. I think there's a great opportunity there because it's still nascent, because I think companies haven't done it because I don't think they see the real merit, or probably even people like Premier League or Grand Slams really don't want their feeds to be disrupted by shopping because they've not caught on to the bandwagon yet. And also depends on markets. Like live shopping is very popular in China, where the conventional sports, we don't even have any really credible data as to would they actually watch a football game, or which sports are popular where they will integrate live commerce. In the US, it's still starting off. So probably in an NFL game or NBA game, imagine in the old days when Jordan started with the Air Jordans, and if you had that capability, Air Jordan's probably the largest selling shoe for Nike. They've made a movie on it, right? Imagine if you had the same thing right now, it probably sales would go to the roof, because look, we all shop online these days for many things, right? Shoes included, or even apparel, or anything for that matter. Yes, for certain things, would you buy a Virat Kohli kind of bat if there's an SG bat or whatever? I don't know, Gun and More bat. right? Will you buy the same bat because Virat Kohli just hit a cover drive off it? I know you want to buy the same bat, and if I have... See, the thought in this is very noble, but unless you see conversions, people are not going to do that. So live commerce is something which is exciting, but I think it's like the metaverse somewhere. It's a little too ahead of its time right now. It'll come, but it'll take time.
Yeah. That's very true. Some things just need to be shaped over time.
Yes.
So, talking about the digital revolution in sport,
Yes.
how has it evolved? What are the changes and what are the challenges that have come with it?
Yeah. So I think if you ask that specific question, I think fan engagement and how you can serve fans better is the challenge now. Because as far as the broadcast goes, you may just have new cameras which may come. Look, I cannot change how a team plays, right? So if India has a good team right now, maybe after 2-3 years when it's in transition, I can't change that as a broadcaster or as a digital creator or in being the video business. What I can do is I am the person who embellishes the sport. So I can get better camera angles, I can get probably better VR and AR experiences, which all tie into what the fan is consuming, right? So I think more and more we are coming to a place where we have to understand as to what can delight the fan the maximum way, right? We've looked at many ways and many kinds of fans who even today probably talk to a stripped down version of just wanting to watch the live game. They don't want the bells and whistles. While there are certain fans who want certain kind of ways in which they will be delighted, right? So if you even see OTT platforms, now they give you an option to watch the match through multiple camera angles. But if you go back to the default, it's not like they're going to stop watching, right? So all of these things have to be really thought about. Even things like AR and VR in terms of things which a lot of broadcasters are doing or even franchises are doing or teams are doing, it has to be done to a level in which it doesn't come in between the live experience, right? So I think it's the challenge lies there as to what extent that can you go to delight the fan or keep the fan engaged, because the options are a lot, right? So I think what one really needs to think is what can make the experience better. I think that is the operative part, is anything that makes the experience even better season on season is something which every broadcaster needs to think about. So that, certain things may not be in the hands of the broadcaster, like a strategic timeout or maybe a game which is getting delayed because of certain things. But what they can focus is on how they make the experience when the game is on, also when there is no game on. How do they make the experience better?
So you could say it's a very thin line between entertaining the customer and losing the value that the live match has to offer.
Absolutely. I think you've made a very good point. There is a very thin line. You don't want to go into the realm where you make it a joke, where it's just, then I'd rather watch memes, right? But I think there is a lot of scope in increasing fandom among people for a particular sport. And we don't realize the importance of that many a times. Many a times broadcasters have come in that space where they think, okay, live matches ab dekhenge, right? If I have the rights, everybody's going to watch my channel, right? But you need to serve fans as to the new things they are adapting to their daily life, right? A lot of consumption now is on mobile phones. How are we, like, if you see what Star did, they did a vertical feed for the World Cup last year. And that was something which they realized that most of the things that we consume on our phone is vertical, right? We don't, even though you can change your angle and make it horizontal, but you are almost serving a person's basic need, where you're telling them, okay, you don't even have to be that much effort, you don't need to put, and let's just give a vertical feed and delight the viewer in that aspect. So you need to be ahead of the game in kind of thinking of what is coming next. So you need to know what popular culture is, you need to know what the younger fan wants, you need to be able to service a female audience, because that's really growing, which is very good, into sport. And a lot of women-oriented content is coming onto all these platforms. So you need to understand where your demographic is, what your target audience is, and what they want. But I think the main thing is you need to be able to make good content, right? Because once you kind of build on volume, many times you may get complacent and make some really bad content also.
Yeah, that's true. You can't get complacent with
absolutely.
any regard. So, talking about mentoring, you were at Sporjo. So, what motivated you to go into that field, kind of sharing your experiences with the up-and-coming journalists?
So, I think what happened was Sporjo kind of came to me when this was a pandemic thing. So, I was, while I was at Sportskida, I was working from home. Even all my jobs, luckily or unluckily, have been working from home lately. So, it was a good opportunity to reach out to people who are upskilling. Like I said earlier, upskilling was something which was largely a product of the pandemic. And they reached out to me saying that there are a lot of students out there who would like to get into the sports industry, but would like to connect with mentors in the space to understand. I think it was a great opportunity is because, I always, whenever I think about mentoring or coaching somebody, I always go back to my childhood or my teens or when I was in my 20s where I won't say I was lost, but I did not have the right information from the industry. Like, I think anybody who is wanting to succeed, if you get a head start, it really makes your life easy. So if somebody gets good advice from somebody in the industry, it really helps. So I kind of got into doing that, and I've been doing it. I think I was still doing it till a few months back with Sporjo, where if there are students who come with different kind of aspirations, they may come, somebody may want to become an anchor, somebody may want to just become a good content writer, somebody may want to get into live broadcast. And most of the time students are confused. And it's no fault of theirs, because you don't grow up being somebody who's aware about everything. And there has to be that gap to fill. So if they get that direct communication with somebody who's worked in the industry, it really probably skips them some of the agony. And my idea was to actually kind of get them almost ready to a place where they know what they're getting into and what kind of job are they looking for, right? And I think many of us, these days see a lot of these motivational speakers or a lot of people who have achieved success in life, who always tell you that you need to have a goal in life, right? Or you need to plan ahead for whatever you need to do. And I think that was the idea when I worked with Sporjo, is to kind of build out a timeline for everybody who's probably just finished college or is graduating or wants to get into the sports industry, because it's so vast now, right? You have so many different leagues, you have so many associations, teams, federations, etc. What is that you really want to do is something that a mentor like this can help you do. So that was the idea when I kind of got into it and still would do it.
Yeah. So post that mentoring, you have gone on to now impart your expertise to us here at IISM.
Yes.
So does that same philosophy apply here as a guest lecturer, or are there some changes that you...
Yes, definitely it does, because when you're teaching something, I think it changes a little bit, because I come to teach few subjects. So my thought process in that first and foremost is, how much have you understood? When we look at our education system, or we even look at the exam-oriented subjects that we have, the whole end goal is marks, which is important. I'm not saying marks are not important or exams aren't important. But when I'm teaching a subject, the first thing that I would like my students, or when I'm coming out there to teach them a particular subject, is two things. One is making them understand that subject first, and using all the experience I've had in my sporting career as a media person to impart some of that, because there is no equivalent to experience. You can't learn experience in a textbook.
That's true.
You can't learn experience by just, meditating or something, right? You need to feel it to be able to impart it, right? And many times I think experience is about, okay, I made these mistakes, or this is what I learned the hard way. The idea of my teaching or mentoring has always been so that students can learn from my experience and they can understand better. So mentorship may be probably too focused about a particular thing. teaching is more about understanding the psychology of the student also. Because if I'm teaching 60 students, mentorship may be one-on-one.
Yeah.
60, 70 students is about making sure that I am approachable and accessible to the weakest student and the smartest student at the same time.
Yeah.
I can't make a distinction.
That's true.
Right? Because that is what a teacher needs to be like. I can't just come and teach and go thinking, okay, this is what I've taught you. Now it's up to you guys to make good of it. My idea is to help, is to be accessible to every student who is there. Because, even though I've learned or heard this line, there is no bad student, there's only a bad teacher. So I try my best every class that I come, that I can be a good teacher. Sometimes I achieve it, sometimes probably it's challenging, but that is my endeavor every time.
You're certainly a brilliant teacher from at least my experience.
Thank you for that.
And I think a lot of the students would agree with that. So, talking about the changing dynamics in the sports industry, what are some emerging trends that the students should be keeping track of, at least the aspiring students?
Yeah. So I think what has changed a lot now is that when I was in college, or even say 10, 12 years back, you needed to complete some kind of an education to get into any industry, especially the content industry. I think, like I said earlier, because of democratization of content, you can become a content creator even when you're in school or in college. So learning certain basic things has not become very difficult, right? Yes, you still need the education. I'm not saying that you don't need education. I think education is very important. Even if you want to get an education in mass communication, I'm not saying that you skip college unless you're a prodigy or something, which is very, very rare. But what has changed now is that you can get a head start much earlier. Earlier, it was like you got a formal education, companies or channels or media organizations hired you only if you had like a post-graduation or you had a sports management degree, etc. And then got you in. And then you learned a lot on the job, right? Now, I think you can almost do like an internship while you're in college. Because there's so much of knowledge and there's so much access available. For example, you gave an example of Sporjo. I am connecting with a student, or even if what I'm doing here at IISM is I'm connecting with the student and sharing real life examples, which he or she would get only if they start working somewhere and would get from their peers or seniors. They are getting a head start much earlier, right? So what I would advise is that invent a job rather than look for a job. Right? Create your own job. If it could be anything from maybe some jobs you can't, you really need to work in that but I think content creation or content strategy for sure, or even if it means probably production of anything, you can learn doing camera on your own by seeing tutorials now, right? Or even if you create your own in-house show, which you keep on working on, you can start doing it at the undergrad level. You don't need to really learn that job primarily when you will get expertise, you will get better exposure when you get into a job, but you can come already with some kind of experience. Or you can actually show some people and dazzle them that I already know this, right? So my point being that there are a lot of jobs now which can be self-created, where you can get a wealth of information in advance and you can proceed. So what has happened is it's dangerous at one level because a lot of conventional jobs are going out of business. So one needs to be nimble to think of what you need to really do. Secondly is, if you can really be somebody who can invent your niche, where you're good at something, you can really be good at a very young age and carry that on. So it's kind of somewhere in between. I will not say that it's really good or really bad, but one really doesn't need a great degree now especially in this field I'm saying specifically, where you really need to get that fantastic job. What you need is hunger, and what you need is self kind of belief, exactly, to be able to do something different. I think that's a very important part. And if you can go seeking out people who can help you, then really you can be good at creating that job, that ideal job that you're looking for, rather than Dude, yeah, there are conventional jobs which are still there, and those will always, to an extent, remain important. But I think now what is really crucial is to plan and see where you want to be 5-10 years in advance. In the old days, it was you just kind of let your company do the progression for you, and you could kind of be a little complacent. These days, even I, in my mid-career, feel that if complacency sets in, then it's going to be bad for me. So for a younger person, it could be even more dangerous.
So it's just about being focused and driven towards your goal, essentially. So we spoke about passion previously. So there's always this balance that we need to strike between professionalism and passion. And how does one manage to tread that thin line?
So I think passion is required for anything that you do, right? Especially, I think in a creative field, you need to be passionate about it. You can be a great accountant if you're not passionate about accountancy. I think accountants will get angry if I say that. I'm myself a BCom, so I'm a half accountant, though I was not very good at being one. But what I'm saying is, especially in the creative field, you need to have a lot of passion, right? The part of professionalism comes is when you need to really get work done, right? Just being passionate is not enough. Just being professional is not enough in this creative field. You need to have a mix of both, and you need to have a mix of a very high degree of both. Because every day to come and create content, and remember one thing, in content, you are only as good as what you did yesterday. If you've done a great show 1 year back, nobody really cares. It's like, imagine somebody's doing a great film, right? Shah Rukh Khan has had great success now, but he had a lot of flops in between, and people were writing him off, saying he's too old, etc. But till Pathaan release, nobody said that the king is back, right? Similarly, it's like sport, right? Virat Kohli doesn't score 100 for few test matches, and people say he's old, he should retire from one format. So it is, the creative space is like that. So if you're not passionate every day, you won't be able to create good content. The professionalism part comes is where it makes you come every day to your place of work and to make you do what you're trying to do, right? So even if tomorrow you decide to just be somebody who's behind the camera and shoot videos and you're not really in the content space, how are you going to make every video look better than what it was before? Yes, these days you have cameras which even an ordinary person looks good because of that. But there is always a difference about who's holding that camera, right? So you need to be able to, I think the professionalism part comes where you don't remain complacent about your passion. Passion is not going to get you everywhere in life. It will probably get you, it'll give you a seat at the table. But to be able to be the best person at the seat at the table is you need the professionalism.
That's very true. It's like this line I've always heard: you can have talent, but it's the hard work that will
exactly. A lot of people have talent, but I think talent is something which is a very overused word. I don't think talent is anything without hard work, right? And you don't want to be that person who people say, oh, he's got great talent, but he's not working hard enough, right?
That's very true. So you have covered a few games over your career. Which one would be your favorite that you would have covered?
I think the most exciting thing for me was covering the Olympics, because it is a multi-sport event, gives you so many facets of sport, which a single event doesn't, right? And the best part about the Olympics, what I felt was when I was at the media center there, and I was very young in my career that time, is I saw the entire world was there. So which you don't get. Probably you get at a cricket World Cup, but that's only 10 teams or something, right? But at an Olympics, you have 100 countries. So you have people from probably a country which you've probably just heard, or you can't even locate on the map, but there's somebody competing from that. Plus, the great thing about something like covering a multi-sport event is every day there's a new sport to learn, and there's a new facet to that sport, which you kind of learn. So it's a lot of keeping up about what is happening. And many Olympic sports are kind of complicated. Like shooting, for example, was something which was very, very, looks very good, or, but to understand the sport or scoring in shooting is complicated unless you try to learn it. Right? And every discipline in shooting has a different way of scoring.
Yeah.
So it challenges you. I think anything which challenges you in covering sport is something which has interested me. So multi-sport events do that. It, like in Olympics, or even I've even covered in Asian Games. So that was something which is an eye-opener. Also, what happens in a lot of these sports is because there are athletes which you don't hear of a lot, their stories are more interesting.
Yeah.
Cricket, you will know about a cricketer when he's playing or even if he's not playing, right? Because there's so much coverage on it. Especially in India or even in the world. Multi-sport, you will not know about a marathoner other than probably a marathon in a city, or if it's in a multi-sport event. Otherwise, what that person does, what that person likes to eat, or what that person's personality is, you'll never get to know that.
That's true.
And that's what a multi-sport event does. So I think that is something which I've enjoyed the most. And trust me, I think there's no bigger thing than winning an Olympic medal in the world. So, like a very famous thing they say about 100 meters race, which is the blue ribbon event of any Olympics or any multi-sport event. The race is only for 9 seconds or 10 seconds, right? But the build-up is for like few years. Like Usain Bolt has to work hard for 4 years for those 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't think anything can come close to that.
Yeah.
So I think that is something which really, really makes me want to be in sport more than anything else.
And talking about that was your favorite event to cover. If out of your entire career up till now, you had to pick out one event or incident that has been the most memorable to you, what would that be?
I think I was very, very lucky that early on in my life, when I went to cover the Beijing Olympics in 2008, India won its first ever individual gold medal when Bindra won in the 10-meter air rifle. And very frankly, at that time, probably so if I have to tell you a story, the event was the shooting range was very far from the main city, because in a multi-sport event, the stadiums are not all in one place many a times. So it was quite far and we had to get there by cab. And, understanding, and at that time, now we expect Indians to win a lot of medals, or we even expect somebody like Neeraj Chopra is now, every time he goes to compete, we expect that he's going to win a medal. This is 2008 when, India had never won an individual gold medal. The only gold medals we had won were in hockey, which was still, the last one was in 1980. So nobody went thinking that he's going to win a gold medal, right? And shooting is a precision sport. It depends on that day how you're good amongst your competition. And if you see the 10-meter air rifle event, to get the best, come in the top 8 and then win that in the final, you have to be able to hit the target, the middle of the target, right? So the scope of margin of error is so small, you don't expect. And imagine covering such a sport. And the day he won that, initially, I didn't even realize how big it was for India, right? Now, we know because India regularly wins medals. But that time, that was the first thing. And the most amazing thing was when he came out after getting his medal. If you've seen Abhinav Bindra, or even if you've seen him as a person or met him, he's a very unassuming person. Okay, now because he's retired and he's done a lot of public speaking and he comes at events and all, and he's told his story so many other times, I think there's a bit of an aura about him. But, meeting him and interviewing him that time was almost surreal. Like, so much so that I feel, if I look back at that interview, I was really bad when I interviewed him. Because I didn't even know, possibly, other than the regular basic questions, I was very green behind, in terms of my experience. He was so unassuming that he gave the answers as if he's just taken a walk in the park and come. It's not like he was giving it as a gold medal winner. So, these things stick out and the memory still remains in your mind. So I think that was the greatest moment in my career as far as being a journalist in sports has been. Yes, seeing, remembering other cricket games or, going to a stadium or seeing other stuff is there, but nothing comes close. Like I said, an Olympic medal, an Olympic gold medal where, the national anthem is played. I don't think anything comes close to anything in sport. When India won the World Cup, unfortunately, I was not at Wankhede, so I really can't say, but I was in the office producing a show for that. So that was pretty big. But India had already won one World Cup before. So it wasn't, it was a great moment. And later on, seeing everybody on the streets with the Indian flag. So anything which is a nation sport thing always kind of stands out where you are part of the action somewhere. But I think Bindra winning the gold medal will always be something in my sporting career. If you had to ask me, I have certain highlights in my news career also. I know we are not talking about that, but I did cover the 26/11 terrorist attacks.
That's
not a great thing to be proud of, but I went by default there. But that was not something of a happy thing to kind of talk about. But sporting career would be this one for sure.
That's a very interesting. Not a lot of people can say they've interviewed India's first gold medalist winner.
Yeah.
So, on an ending note, what's one piece of advice you would give to aspiring sports journalists?
Well, I think on an ending note, I would say certain things which I've already said is get into the field if you're really passionate. Like I said, it's not a job. It is something which you need to do every day, which you can do day in and day out for many years. If you're looking at it to get into the glamour, there is glamour in it, but don't get in for it, right? Secondly, I would say that if you want to make a career in journalism per se or sports journalism, you need to have supreme confidence. And I'll repeat a line which one of my professors told me when I was in journalism is you need to be heard and seen. If you're somebody who is not going to be able to put yourself out there and have that confidence or not have that passion, then it's going to be difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but get into the profession if you really want to be somebody who can really leave a mark on the content, on your colleagues. Because again, no offense to accountants, you rather work in a bank then. Because if you want to do a 9-to-5 job, you want public holidays, you want an easy life, then journalism is not for you. Sports journalism definitely is not for you if you want to chill on the weekend. And one last bit I would say is when I got into the profession, I really used to enjoy sports a lot to just watch casually. That kind of diminishes when it becomes your work. Yes, people think it's a great thing that you get paid to watch sport. It's not that easy, trust me. There's a lot of things to it, and somehow the passion starts to wane in terms of pleasure in watching the game, because you know so many things which happen behind the scenes. You know so many, they say familiarity breeds contempt. That kind of happens with the sports persons, the sport, the leagues, the franchises, everything. But what really stands out even today for me, if you say, is the passion. Any random game, if you tell me to watch, even if I don't watch it on TV, if I follow the score online, I like to be updated. So my passion for knowing what's happening is what has kept me in this game, even though probably watching a sport on TV has gone down a little bit. Like I used to watch any game in the past. Now that's kind of changed. So you need the passion and you need to be somebody who can put yourself out there. Otherwise, work in a bank.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, has been it for Mr. Shantanu here. It has been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Irish. It was a pleasure to me too.
Ladies and gentlemen, that has been it for today's episode. We thank you for being with us on Buzz Behind Sports, an IISM initiative. We'll catch you guys in the next episode, and you can watch all our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other platforms. Thank you.